Good morning. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about how commercial subcontractors can be your biggest asset. It can also be your biggest nightmare, but we'll talk about that at the next production presentation. So today we're going to talk about how they can help you and be your golden asset on how to get jobs done. As you know, the insurance restoration is a $210 billion per year industry. There are tens of thousands of restoration contractors. What we want to do is have the best of the best that are out there with the best training and the best skills. And in the famous words of Mr. Taylor Cates, an attorney in the restoration industry, he said, let's make new mistakes, not repeat the old ones. So anytime you make a mistake, just make sure you don't repeat that one again. So that's some of what we want to talk about today on mistakes that have been made. So, how many times did you actually use a yacht like this in 10 years? So the question would be would you rent this yacht and try to operate it yourself? Would you hire somebody that had a yacht like this and have them to operate it for you and the folks that you would like to go out and have fun with? Well, it depends on if you can operate it or not. The first instinct may be, well, I just want to buy it myself. Second instinct may be, I want to rent it. But if you sit back and think about it for a while, if you just want to go out to sea and have fun, 4 or 5 times a year, maybe even 10 times a year, you're better off to have somebody else drive it up to port, pick you up, carry you out for a good time for however long you want to stay, and bring it back in. When you get through and get off the boat, they'll clean it up, they'll polish it, they'll shine it, they'll get it ready for the next trip. Chances are that's a lot cheaper for you than insurance and maintenance and upkeep and operation. And plus, you probably have a little bit more fun letting them operate it other than you. So it's one example of a subcontractor. Another one may be this. Would you buy a condo in Miami or stay in a 5-star hotel? My wife and I went and looked at a condo once in Miami, and we decided we were going to buy it. We thought it was a pretty good deal. So we made the deal with the folks and got ready for the quote-unquote closing for this timeshare condo. And I used an old adage that my father once said, if something's a good idea today, it will be a good idea tomorrow. So I put a halt on the closing, told them we'd be back the next morning. Of course, the high-pressure salesman said, no, this is a deal just for today. And so I told him, well, it's probably not just my day then. So that night I got up in the middle of the night thinking about the deal that we'd made and thinking about the cost of the condo and looking at maintenance fees and looking at condo fees and looking at all the taxes and the insurance that came with it. So out of the maintenance fees, the condo fees, the insurance, and the taxes, I figured out that I could stay in a 5-star hotel 10 times in a year for 3 nights at a time. Now, it didn't take much rocket scientists to figure anything out after that to know that I can go to a 5-star hotel. I can subcontract that out, if you will. I can have somebody wait on me hand and foot. I can stay 3 nights of the week, 10 times a year, and not have to own it, not have to insure it, or not have to upkeep it or do anything else like that. So when you're talking about subcontracting and stuff, consider that as one of the things that you might want to look at in that. Let's talk about the extra cost of trucking. A lot of us in this restoration industry like to have the bad trucks. They do look good. Now, if you're driving that because you want to look good and you want your truck to be bigger than Billy Bob's, then that's probably a good investment. But if you're buying that because you think you need it to pull that boat with, guess what? You won't have to have it if you rent the boat out or subcontract the boat out. If you think you're going to use it to pull that big trailer load of equipment you're going to buy, well, you may not want to use that if you're going to subcontract out that equipment and that help on that job. You've got extra fuel costs, extra tires, extra wear and tear, and you're starting with a $100,000 truck, not one that's much less expensive if you didn't need to be doing all that work. It is very easy to subcontract out hauling and trucking than it is to try to do it yourself. We're going to talk about that here a little bit more. More toys that may be easier to subcontract out that don't get used very much. Motor coaches that we use for mobile offices. If you're going to use a mobile office for several months out of the year, then you probably need to try to put in your budget to buy one. If you're going to use a motor coach or motor home 2 times a year, maybe 3 times a year, you may want to look at subbing that out, having someone bring you one, park it on your site, leave it there for you to use until you're finished with it. They make very good mobile offices for you to be able to do your work when you're out on site. Most of us don't ride bikes too much. Some of us do. But for the ones that do, if you're going to ride that bike 2 times a year, that's something else you want to sub out or rent out, is a bike to ride. Most of us don't own airplanes, so that's certainly not something you're going to go buy to take 5 or 6 flights a year in. You'll probably choose Southwest, Delta, or American, or some Blue Sky or something else like that to do. So when you're looking at the expense of these things, what I'm trying to say, you have a ton of overhead. You think if I buy 1,000 air movers, those 1,000 air movers don't eat. But then you're going to insure them. You've got to have a trailer or 2 or 3 to store them in, and you have to insure that trailer. Then you have to keep up with the tires on that trailer. You have to keep up with taxes and tags and license and fees and upkeep on that trailer. If it breaks down on the way to the job site, you've got to deal with that. So you may want to subcontract out that when it comes to trucking. You know, one way of looking at it is sort of being like it is when you go out to dinner with an adjuster. Would you want to go out to dinner with an adjuster and they sit across the table and they're going to ask, you know, what was the price of the meat and the steak? You know, what was your actual labor cost? And how much was the charge to cook it after they got the bill and consumed it? So that's sort of some of the things you'd look at here is how do you look at that? How do you get by that when you're looking at subcontractors? You can deal with that cost up front. When you're dealing with a subcontractor, you always want to make your agreements up front. You want to make them plain and clear and precise so you know what you're getting and what you're paying, that you're not having to negotiate it at the end. This is an example of buying a bunch of equipment but having nowhere to put it. As you can see, the equipment is much larger than the building, and you can't even see the ends of it on the right or the beginnings of it on the lower end of the picture. So it wasn't a lot of planning went into that. So now all of a sudden you've got extra expenses when you could have simply rented that equipment to do a job or two, and you could have come out a lot better with that. Maintenance. As you can see, we're working on an air mover here, and it takes 3 people to maintenance that air mover. Probably see the grill screen on that looks a little dusty, so they're probably taking it apart to clean it. So you got to have a supervisor and 2 people to do it, and that's another cost that you add when you choose to do that service yourself, as opposed to having a subcontractor to bring that kind of stuff in for you. Labor pretty much hits the same way. Do you rent your labor, hire your labor out, sub your labor out, or do you try to do it? Let's hope that most of us are busy all day, every day. I don't think there's too many people in the meeting here that have people sitting around the table waiting on what to do each day and just sit there sort of like the fire department and wait on the phone to ring. I don't think we see that much. So usually we're busy every day. So when you all of a sudden get a job and you need another project manager. You need a consultant. You need 150 skilled labor. You need 50 general labor. Those are the times that you want to have a list of subcontractors, a very good list of subcontractors that you can reach out and call upon to come help you do that job. Will you make as much money on that job as you had your own people on it? No, you won't. But will you make as much money in the 3-month period before, during, and after? Probably so, because you're not paying those people to sit around when they're not working. They simply come, they do a job, and they leave. This is a job site where there's about 250 people working on it or so. And you cannot take 250 people on a job site and tell them to all go to lunch at 12 and be back at 1. There's not too many cities that have a geographical location that many people can go to eat at once and to get back on time. So when you're running large crowds, you need to sub out the lunch and dinner breaks. This particular project, we subbed out for 3 different lunch breaks, like one at 11, one at 11:30, and one at 12, to be able to get everybody through the eating process at the same time. See, the tables and chairs are sitting on, that was subbed out. That was subbed out to a party rental company that would bring tables and chairs over for people to be able to sit there and eat. So subcontractors are a very, very, very important part of what you should have on a large loss program. Support for equipment on large loss program. Now, you've got, again, 3 choices. You can own it and deal with the maintenance and the trucking and the upkeep, etc. You can rent it and deal with how to set it up and the operation of it. You also may have to deal with the consequences of rental when the adjuster says, I just want to pay the rental bill and I'll give you 10% above that, or I'll give you 15%. Most of them will say, I'm not paying overhead and profit on mitigation. It depends on your contract and how you get that done. That's a different day to discuss that. But bigger equipment's something that you might want to look at subcontracting out and having someone come out that can help you with that, set stuff like that up for you, to operate it for you, to keep it going. As I said, you probably don't have a lot of people sitting around the table just waiting on the time to come in to get that done. So you're able to hire experts with the snap of your finger or the flip of your phone to come out and do that for you and make you look good, makes your company look good, and keeps things easy for you to be able to keep things rolling smoothly as you go. Here's another example of equipment, or maybe some of the equipment that's in the same slide you had there. Looking at about $150,000 to $200,000 in this piece of equipment to go out and purchase that. And if you're going to use that 10 times a year, that's probably a good investment. If you're going to use that every now and then, or 2 or 3 times a year, you might want to consider subbing that out. We're going to talk about the qualifications you need to drive that kind of stuff, but here we go back in the front left of that corner of that big expensive truck you've got to have to pull it with, because a small truck is not going to pull that. So you're going to have something much larger to pull that with. Also see propane in the middle of that trailer. Maybe something that you would need a hazardous material license to be able to pull that. So some of the things that you need to learn and get accustomed to and adjusted to having to go out when you go out and buy equipment versus the subcontractors with it. All those blue air movers you seen in front of that building earlier will not fit into this trailer. There were too many of them there to put in one trailer. So now you're dealing with semi-loads. You're dealing with a whole different ball of wax. You're dealing with CDL license, you're dealing with government regulations, you're dealing with government taxes for these trucks. Taxes on these are going to start at about $10,000 to $12,000 a year, depending on how many miles you run them and stuff like that. So it's a whole different ball game as far as how long you can run these trucks and make a profit at it versus them sitting still for a few days and not being used a whole lot. You could use this trucking as an advantage and just pile it all on a small truck. However, that may get you by if you're running 5 miles down the road to overload a vehicle or do something like that. But there are quite a few federal regulations that will put a little bit of damper on that if you are trying to go down the interstate with that or go down city streets with that or something such as that. You look at this truck and you're looking at 3 different things to get into your federal statute. You're looking at the GVRW of the truck that you're pulling. You're looking at the GVRW of the trailer. And when you add those 2 things together, you can figure out from that point if you need a CDL license to pull these or if you're legal just to drive it. And item number 1 there, if you weigh over 10,100 pounds, you have to have a medical card to drive that vehicle. If the truck and the trailer combined weigh over 26,000 pounds for the GVWR, then you need a Class A driver's license to drive that. That's the same driver's license it takes to drive that 18-wheeler that we showed you in the earlier slide. And yes, it's a small truck. It looks like a smaller trailer, but the federal government goes by the GVWR gross vehicle weight rating to be able to tell you which of the type of driver's license that you have to have. The black trailer in this picture with this truck may or may not go over the legal limit for having to have a Class A driver's license. The little one probably would not go over that legal limit. But you still need to know those rules. And again, the trucking's something that you might want to sub out. You're like, well, how can I get a truck that quick? If you're pulling trailers such as the black one in this picture to the job site or such as the gooseneck that was in the other slide, there are trucking companies that provide services that can pull those trailers for you. Also a good service to take advantage of that's already used to doing commercial services would be the wrecker services that are in your town or in your area. They're used to being on emergency service call. They're used to jumping and running pretty quick, so it's pretty easy for them to come over and hook to a trailer of any size, big or small, and carry it somewhere for you.